Hello, and welcome to the Data Science and Analytics Undergraduate Research Symposium. My name is Latanya Brown Robertson. I'm Principal Investigator for the Data Science and Analytics Initiative at Bowie State University, and I'm a professor of economics in the College of Business.
Hi, I'm Samantha Nichols. I am a school psychology graduate student here at Bowie, and I am also a graduate assistant with the College of Business.
Great. Before we begin, I just wanted to give you all some background knowledge into the Data Science and Analytics Summer Undergraduate Research Program. You can find the information within the program that we're about to share with you now. Samantha, did you share the program? I can't see. We're going to share it with you in 1 second. Okay, great. So what you'll see right now is the program for our Data Science and Analytics Undergraduate Research Symposium. Please follow along with me. I'm going to read page 2, which is the historical background of our Data Science and Analytics Surrey program. Since 2018, the Data Science and Analytics, as known as the DSA initiative at Bowie State University, has provided students and faculty with opportunities to engage in experiential learning using data inside and outside of the classroom. Along with infusing data science and analytics across the curriculum at Bowie State University, the initiative has also played a role in the university's 9-week summer research program called Surrey. Under the university's Surrey program, faculty from various disciplines actively mentor student research teams. The DSA Surrey program utilizes the same research process as the original Surrey, along with offering students intense training and focus in data science and analytics. This summer, due to COVID-19, the DSA Surrey program moved to a virtual environment. 11 faculty members with 10 student researchers made up 5 of our DSA Surrey focused research groups. In conjunction with organizations such as Tableau and Public Block, along with the Surrey 2020 DSA faculty research mentors, we offered DSA professional development opportunities to ensure that all teams were well equipped to have a successful data-intensive research experience. Students completed 1 to 2 DSA initiative online modules, 5 virtual workshops, and numerous research and presentation training sessions covering topics such as research methods, data science methodology process, data cleaning and visualization, data analytics, machine learning, and deep learning. Students also explored data governance, integrity, and ethical best practices, along with understanding how to conduct their discipline of study to the field of data science and analytics. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to Samantha, where she will introduce our first speaker.
Yeah, so now it's time to introduce some of our special guests. So coming first is the Dean of the College of Business, Dr. Lawrence McNeil.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
We're going to turn off the screen so we can go ahead and maximize you. So Samantha, can you turn off your presentation slides? Okay, great.
All right. Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to the students who have accomplished so much. I'm hearing great things about your accomplishments this summer, and I just want to say congratulations first and foremost. In my short time here this morning, I want to talk a little bit about data analytics in the 21st century. It's a fascinating time when we think about the role of data analytics within this digital economy. You know, we've seen 4 major economic revolutions humankind has. One's built on steam power, one's built on electric power. In the mid 20th century, we've seen electronics and IT in terms of the economic shift, and now we see a 4th one. And this is one that is built on the 3rd economic revolution, but it has a much more exponentially advanced component to it in that it's a digital economy and that it's based on advanced technologies. And in this current economy, we effectively see two technological trends, one of acceleration and then the other of disruption. Now think about acceleration for a second, where the reach of technology is significantly multiplied. Think about the social media tools that we have at our disposal. Facebook's more than 1 billion users. Think about software as a service with Salesforce. All of these technologies and the advances that we've seen are built upon mobile computing, cloud technologies, and big data. One thing we've also seen is disruption, right? The average lifespan of companies has been declining, especially if you look at the S&P 500, and that's in large part because of creative destruction. Companies are needing these days to leverage key insights from large data sets, which means companies are increasingly placing value on data analytic skill sets that you, the students, have honed this summer. It is a high growth career within this digital economy. Look at what IBM said back in 2013, that 90% of the world's data has been created in the last few years. So between about 2009 to 2013, 90% of the world's data has been created. Why is that? It's because of the Internet of Things. It's because of digital sensors. The problem, though, with all of this data is that companies are significantly underutilizing it. In fact, one study said that companies only utilize about 5% of their own data. So what does this mean for you, the students? It means there's a digital skills gap, and it's one that you can significantly leverage. Every major industry needs these data analytic skills to survive. I was looking at the BLS reports the other day, and it's talking about how the United States could be short as many as 250,000 data analysts in the next 5 years. There is a significant disequilibrium in the labor market. A McKinsey study showed a 50% gap between the supply and demand of deep analytic talent. So what happens now? Well, this summer you gained some real world skills. This summer you figured out how to turn data into insights. You mastered the art of storytelling. We're going to see that later with your presentations. And you realize that in our College of Business, the language is data. That is our language. You can figure out how to utilize empirical evidence to do many things going forward. When you think about the skills that you acquired and the skills that you'll continue to acquire, you can create new technologies. Think about the music streaming industries and self-driving cars, artificial intelligence within smartphones. These are skill sets that are at your grasp. Think about the opportunity to do original research and to create knowledge with large data sets. And very importantly, in today's highly partisan environment, think about how you can leverage data to inform the public debate, and more importantly, inform public policy. The best debates, you turn on CNN, you turn on Fox, you turn on all these stations. What are the best debates? The best debates are ones we're not just talking qualitatively, they're talking quantitatively. They're utilizing statistics and data to underscore fine points. This is the type of skills that we're going to need more of, and it's the type of skills that you have acquired this summer. As the College of Business prepares for the future of work, your experience this summer represents a microcosm of our efforts. In fact, just last week, our proposal to offer a concentration in data analytics was approved by our president, and now it moves to the USM for their pending approvals. And we thank Dr. Brown Robertson, we thank Dr. Zenobie, we thank Dr. Ntembe for their efforts with this proposal. And next, we're going to be moving our certificate program in data analytics forward so that can get approved. And this will be not just for business majors, but also for non-business majors. We just hired a data analyst in the College of Business who's going to lead a data analytics committee. They'll be tasked with ensuring we have a deeply embedded data-driven culture. These are some exciting opportunities going forward in the College of Business, of which you are a part. So there are some great days ahead for the College of Business and Bowie State University. And I'm so glad, students, that you already are a direct beneficiary of our data analytics growth and infusion strategy. I congratulate you again, and I look forward to your presentations.
Thank you so much, Dr. McNeil. Okay, so I'm gonna share this. Okay, so up next is Julius Valentine Mina. He currently works as a supervisory partnership specialist at the U.S. Census Bureau. In this role, he establishes strategic partnerships with organizations that serve as the quote-unquote trusted voices in their communities and develops strategies to increase census participation among traditionally hard-to-count populations for the upcoming 2020 decennial census. Prior to this role, Julius Valentine Mina worked as a policy and inclusive innovation specialist at the Minority Business Development Agency. In this role, he worked to build and strengthen relationships with federal agencies, business/trade associations, minority-serving institutions, and other organizations working to support and advocate for the growth of minority business enterprises. Mr. Mina also worked as a first-year instructor/retention advisor within the Earl G. Graves School of Business at Morgan State University, and a first-year assessment and statistics coordinator in the Office of the Provost at University of Baltimore. In his free time, Julius is an avid techpreneur working as the Chief Impact Officer for Public Block and as the Chief of Staff for the Jania Griffin, aka the Commercializer. Mr. Mina holds a BA degree in quantitative methods and a minor in economics from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and a MA degree in human resources development from Bowie State University. He also recently attained his JD from the University of Baltimore School of Law. So welcome.
Julius, your microphone is off.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thank you once again for this opportunity to be here. Thank you to the Dean McNeil for those rousing comments. And I'm actually going to start with what he said. My goal here is to just talk a little bit about how I've leveraged data to inform the public discourse and policy, right? So you hear my bio, but I want simply put, I'm a data nerd who's always chasing data questions. So in undergrad, I did study quantitative methods. And I remember my capstone project was predicated on this question: how do we create a new development dynamic to addressing HIV/AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa? The reason why I got there is I'm born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. And I did not like how they talked about sub-Saharan Africa as it pertained to AIDS. So I said, you know what, I'm going to research this. I'm going to do the data. Thought I was going to work for the World Bank. And then I arrived at Bowie because I loved the narrative around Black and brown populations. I know my professor told me you got to think global, but act locally. So I came to Bowie, Human Resource Development, Bowie, shout out. And I remember arriving at Bowie and I was still asking the same question: how are we addressing the topic of HIV/AIDS in often marginalized communities? And my capstone project at Bowie was, how do we not look at marginalized populations as a workforce problem, right? Or how do we leverage them to make sure that we are properly including the full capacity of our workforce, right? Reentry populations, populations with disabilities, are they being properly included into the workforce? Thought I was going to do something with the Department of Labor. And then I fell for my next problem, which is the education system and reentry. There's something there. I went to law school, and I'm sharing this because as you guys are crafting your narrative of what you're going to do with research and data, I want you guys to always think, find that problem that speaks most deeply to you and honestly try to chase that down. That's what you research. Don't research anything that does not matter to you. And I also say we need more researchers that research things that matter to their community. Arrived at law school. And I remember even at law school, the big problem of the day was unconscious bias and whether or not race is a factor in the law. Believe it or not, the legal framework states that race is not a factor in the law. All sentencing is completely race blind. And I remember sitting there in law school and I said, I don't think that's true. And so I did yet another research paper to try to prove that. And then eventually I arrived in government after working at University of Baltimore, Morgan State, and in those schools, the question that I was trying to answer, can we retain more Black and brown students? And if so, how? And if not, why not? I got pulled into the government because one of my students at Earl G. Gray School of Business said, hey, Mr. J, you talk a lot about business. You talk a lot about the need for more business owners. Do you have a business? And I said, no, that's fundamental flaw in education. We teach things that we haven't done. So I said, you know what? Before I do it, I'm going to become an advocate, right? So there's this new branch called a policy advocate, right? If you can take data and the policymakers use the data to craft this policy narrative. And I arrived at the Minority Business Development Agency with the one goal. We need more money going towards minority business enterprises and HBCUs to be that group that actually just fosters innovation thinking, data thinking, specifically for what Dr. McNeil mentioned, that fourth industrial revolution, right? How do we position our marginalized populations to take a lead role in the fourth industrial revolution? That was the question. And then the census came up, right? So I am currently working the United States Census Bureau. The census is the biggest statistical agency in the planet. And it's also where we take all the data and tell narratives about people, economics, and what needs to be done in terms of changes in policy. So everybody uses our data. You will not go anywhere in the world where you do not see US Census Bureau. Even the big corporations come to us because we have an open data policy. All our data is open. And I'm sharing that to the researchers. Please go to census.gov. We have a data academy. Use that to expand what you're doing, right? Because right now, the biggest policy thing for me is, have you heard of 2020 census, right? It's done every 10 years, the biggest statistical survey done every 10 years, and it informs $675 billion in your communities annually, right? So a lot of times policymakers live in their universe. They know how important the data is. They know how important the confidentiality promises, but the regular population, a lot of times they don't trust data, they don't trust research. And so what I found, my new mission is, we need to talk about data equity differently. We need to talk about the importance of data in our communities differently. And we need to advocate through researchers like the ones in this room who are going to find a research question, attach it to data and say, hey, community, please pay attention to this because this data matters, because the narrative's being told, because that's what data does. It tells a narrative about something. It's always valid, but it's not always accurate. And that's a statistics joke. And what I found is the goal is to get to accurate data. The only way you can get to accurate data, we have to have full participation in the data conversation, full participation in the data economy, and full participation in products and services that we can take from the data, right? Example, COVID-19 informed us differently, right? We watched, at least the Census Bureau, we released a brand new survey to look at how are people really surviving during COVID-19. And then we took our data and said, hey, states, jurisdictions, use this data to really put money where it needs to be in your communities. So my goal here is to just say, I am excited to hear the presentations as a data nerd, as a data advocate. And I want you guys to really consider the full breadth of career exploration when it comes to being a researcher, data advocate, policy advocate. Do not limit yourself because there's always room for the quantitative minds. Right? That's the one area that most people run away from. But if you can tell a narrative using data, right? Create a problem statement and hope to solve it using data, right? And then communicate it to community and say, hey, are you paying attention? We need people at all levels to do something with this data. That is the goal of things like this, the Research Symposium. So once again, thank you. Fill out your census, 2020census.gov. You have until October 31st to fill it out. And if you ever need to reach me, please reach out. I am a Bowie alum, and I'm excited to be part of this. And lastly, you'll hear from one of my other colleagues at publicblock.io. I am part of a startup that is a software as a service model, and we're just looking to use tech as a way to bring equity in our communities. And all that means is we're leveraging our transparent platform. And so as we're building communities, building everything in marginalized populations, our goal is to make sure that we capture all the data in a transparent way so the community can advocate for themselves and everything that's being built in their community. So with that, Dr. Brown, thank you. Dr. McNeil, it's always a pleasure to be here. To the students, I'm excited. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Mina. We are now going to introduce our next speaker. So Samantha's going to pull his bio up, and I'll read it for you all, and then we'll bring Dr. Calvin Johnson up. Dr. Johnson is Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research Evaluation and Monitoring with the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Policy Development and Research. He serves as one of the principal advisors to the department's leadership on research, demonstration, evaluation, activities conducted on behalf of the department. He oversees a broad evaluation portfolio to include projects exploring the impact of housing on non-housing outcomes, economic self-sufficiency, health and wellness, and educational achievement. His portfolio also includes demonstrations, evaluations, and research covering a range of topics, including housing discrimination, homelessness, aging in place, disaster resilience recovery, community planning and development, and building science and technology. Dr. Johnson has also served in research, evaluation, and policy positions at the University of Pennsylvania, the Urban Institute, and with the Executive Office of the Mayor of District of Columbia. We're also fortunate at Bowie State University to have Dr. Johnson as one of our lecturers within the Masters of Public Administration program. Welcome, Dr. Johnson. Okay, can you say something so we can see if we hear you? Okay, we're having technical, we can't hear you. No, we're still unable to hear you. No, he's not muted. What you may have to do, unfortunately, is you might have to go ahead and leave out of the room and then come back into the room, which may clear up your microphone. Okay. 1 second, please. You can check the chat. Okay, bear with us for 1 second, please. While we wait for Dr. Johnson to come back, I just want to say that I am so proud of our student researchers. We're really excited, and you all, as far as the audience, you are in for a treat today. We're going to have wonderful topics explored, and the students have done a great work. Oh, great. Here's Dr. Johnson. Okay, Dr. Johnson, it's all yours.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hey, good morning to the students of the Data Science and Analytics Research Symposium in Surrey. This is an honor to be with you. Let me just start by sharing that my story is your story as it relates to data science. I started somewhere very similar to where you are. I was a math science student and I didn't know quite what to do with my math science interests. And while I was an undergrad, I had an opportunity to work for someone who exposed me to data and the various things that you can do with data. So as you're listening to my presentation this morning, the one thing that I want you to think about is how my story is very much your story. I'm just a lot older than you are right now, but my trajectory is very similar to yours. So let me just go ahead and get started by sharing with you. So you've already heard that I'm a visiting professor at Bowie State University. I'm in the Management, Marketing, and Public Administration Department. And I'm also the Deputy Assistant Secretary at HUD within the Office of Policy Development and Research, where I lead a team of 40 PhD and master's level researchers with various backgrounds, right? Social behavioral sciences, neurosciences, to include economists, statisticians, so forth and so on. And so I'm happy to basically show up at work every day with folk who are excited about using data and leveraging data to not only solve problems, but to answer some of the most intractable problems of our nation around housing and the impact of housing on non-housing outcomes. One of the things that I want to share with you is that my journey, so that you can really understand how my journey is pretty much like the start of your journey. So I'm a math science student at Ballou High School in Southeast Washington, D.C. So I'm hoping that some of you all are from Washington, D.C. and actually know where Ballou High School is. And about 30 years ago, after I graduated from high school and I was in college, I began working for a think tank in DC. And at that think tank, I worked with a group of researchers who were testing out communications to actually flatten the curve on the new rates of HIV/AIDS transmission in countries that had really high rates. So, beyond the US, we were doing this work. And particularly, they were using data to solve this problem. So they had like an intervention that they put in place, a communication ad, a public service announcement, billboards, people knocking on doors, trying to get folk to change their sex practices so that we could flatten the curve on the new rates of HIV transmissions. And it was that very first exposure working with data that I realized the power of it. From that experience, it really shaped my interest and sparked my curiosity in taking classes in graduate school in the areas of statistics, research methods, and data analysis. One might say I was bitten by the data science bug, right? I was bitten by the data science bug because I realized the power of data and the various things that you can do to inform decision-making and to drive policy with data. When I finished graduate school, I actually began my work at the Urban Institute, a think tank in DC established right after the civil unrest in this country in 1968-69. Where I basically use my love for data to work on a number of crime control policy studies, specifically in the area of community policing, assault weapons ban, violent crime prevention strategies, and comprehensive community strategies to prevent crime. Again, learning the power of data to actually inform policy decision just kept being a constant theme in my work. And it excited me more and more about the value of understanding and feeling comfortable with data. After 6 years at the Urban Institute, I joined the faculty at the University of Pennsylvania, where I worked with governments, that is the city of Philadelphia government, as well as the government of the District of Columbia. And my job was to infuse the use of data and data analytics so that not only officials within government, but also training students at the University of Pennsylvania to be great consumers and stewards of data, so that in the public sphere, we can make better decision making. After leaving the University of Pennsylvania, I joined a federal independent executive branch agency, actually responsible for probation and parole for the District of Columbia. And there I led a team of analysts where we develop advanced analytics to really change the way that we supervise folk in the community once they're released from prison. And that's where I think I really kind of saw the power of leveraging large sums of data and using data to basically do good. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. After 11 years with that agency, I then joined the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, where I lead up the actual evaluation functions for the agency, and have been really excited about the team of folk I work with. It's challenging every day, and I can tell you that no matter how good I think my team is, no matter how hard we work, there is always more work than we have bodies to do the work. And so I share that with you just so that you understand that, as the dean already mentioned, and as others have already mentioned, there is a shortage of supply, right? There's a huge demand for data consumers, for data scientists, but we're like short on supply. So the work that you're doing is not work that I would take lightly and take for granted. I would explore it. I would explore the passion that you've developed, explore the interest that you've developed around this work, because there is, or better yet, there are many opportunities out there. So again, I want to share with you that my story is your story. So math science at Ballou High School, and the opportunities to use a little bit of data science along the way. And now I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for a cabinet level agency where I head up the research there. So my story is very much your story. Data is like an asset, and we have to realize that data is an asset. So data is just no longer stuff that's being put into information systems and sitting in servers at some remote location. Data is an asset, and we have to leverage the asset. And we're realizing that we're using so little of it, and now there is a demand for it, and we don't have the resources. We don't have the human resources to do it. We need to make certain that students are graduating comfortable being consumers and being kind of shepherds of these data, good stakeholders with these data. We also need to make certain that we're closing the gap. So I'm really thrilled that Bowie has gotten at least cleared the first hurdle to get their data analytics and data science curriculum approved, and look forward to working with them in that space. The other thing that you should know is that my personal passion is making certain that HBCUs and tribal community colleges and university and Hispanic serving institutions are actually developing the same type of skills with their students that you all have developed over the summer. Because if we're not at the table, if we're not part of the kind of problem identification and the kind of analytic team that are looking for these issues, we're going to find ourselves kind of not being represented in the narrative that gets told with these stories. So it's important that you're there. And finally, as it relates to just my personal background, I was told when I was at Temple working on my master's by a PhD demographer that a little data would take you a long way. And I'll share that with you because I think that it was the best advice or the best kind of words of wisdom that I actually received. A little data will take you a very long way. So continue your passion in this area. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through these slides because I think they kind of highlight some of the things that I think are important as you move forward. So first, big data, what's driving it? Well, basically the volume of data. Storage is really cheap, so we're going to constantly see that we have loads and loads and loads of data, and we don't have enough time to actually analyze it. The Internet of all things is making it much more accessible and making it much more accessible in real time or near real time. We have varying sources of data. So it doesn't matter whether it's unstructured data on the internet, folk are scraping that. It doesn't matter whether it's administrative data that are coming out of record systems and things of that nature. We have a variety of data, and the good thing is that we can mesh them all up rather quickly. There are tools to do that. And the last thing is veracity, right? Veracity. And so it's really about the quality of data, making certain that we are quality assuring our data. In the past, it was much more difficult to do with so much data. We have the tools now, but it's so much data, it just takes longer to do. And so these are the 3 V's. I added one. There are probably a couple more out there, as you saw in the previous slide, that we need to pay attention to. And each of these buckets really speak to the demand that we have for folk with the skill set to be comfortable with data. So the applications, I'm just going to quickly show you. This is just my kind of quick view of the world. I can't live without my Google Maps or my Waze or my Uber or Lyft, right? These are all ways that big data and data analytics are being used on a regular basis. There's not one thing you're doing on a daily basis where you're not using data analytics, or you not using, but where the company, the industry, the folk that are pushing information to you is not using. So these are just examples. And they make their money on trading data, right? Trading and analyzing their data. Now let's talk about feeding artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. This is where I believe the kind of data science world is going. Unfortunately, I've been around for a little while, and I realized that probably 3 years from now, we're going to be talking about even new techniques around artificial intelligence. So really quickly, artificial intelligence, the science, right? It's the science. Back in 1950, we first kind of articulated that we wanted machines to do and actually perform human functions, right? And so the science of artificial intelligence was really about getting machines to do things that humans are otherwise doing. Machine learning is really taking large sums of data and making use, leveraging that data such that we are giving machines examples of the patterns that we're expecting them to pick up on and learn from, and comb through all of the data, coming up with results to see whether or not those machines can actually detect the patterns and refine the way of pattern detection so that those machines can start offloading responsibilities from humans, right? So do we really need to have humans basically estimating models of like attrition from first year of college? So do we need humans to sit behind a computer all day and crank out, things like who's going to make it to the second year of college? No, we can actually get computers to do that. And if you really want to start thinking about transferring the way that humans learn to like machines, and I know this is sounding kind of Minority Reportish or kind of scary here, but we can do deep learning. And that is, our neural systems allow us to detect patterns and respond based on the detection of patterns. We're starting to see that we can train computers to do some of that. And so I think that that's where the discipline is going. And so I would hedge my bet on folk who are developing skills around machine learning and also deep learning. So let's talk about being responsible stewards of this big data world, because there are some risks here. One is privacy. We need to make certain that you understand that whatever you do, we are, those folk who work in this space, want to make certain that we collect data in a responsible fashion. We store data, you use data in a responsible fashion. And we make certain that the data that we collect, that the data is actually in line with the purpose we've told people that we're collecting those data, and that we're good shepherds of the data. We're also following regulation and laws. You've heard of the Privacy Act, FERPA, HIPAA, and it goes on and on and on. But we have to understand that our responsibility as data scientists is to be good stewards of the data. Also, data ethics. I believe that data scientists have the right to pursue questions that interest them. But I also believe that data scientists have a responsibility to understand the work that they're doing and the impact that it's going to have on the people from whom they've collected that data. So your questions could potentially have a negative impact, and we need to always be mindful of that. And then let's just talk about, I'm just going to quickly share with you the machine learning life cycle. You probably learned this already, but this is a standard kind of method, right? So we have questions and problems, we collect data, we train the algorithms, we test and observe, we collect the feedback, and then we incorporate the feedback and we refine the algorithm. So why did I share that with you? Because I want to talk about the application that's around us. And these are my last 4 points that I'm going to make. One is that we're seeing the use of data mining and machine learning techniques in the healthcare space. And I'll just give you one example. So we know that the use of cell phone data to kind of flatten the curve of the coronavirus in South Korea is an important strategy, right? And so they're using volumes of data from cell phones and where people are actually located. So you have cell phone data that kind of provides you the location of folk, and so you have a really good sense of kind of how much social interaction you have in a space and at a time where we should be social distancing. One example, transportation, Uber, right? Uber basically takes your phone, you have an app, you basically call up an Uber, it's taking your location, your geolocation, and it's finding the geolocation of all of the available vehicles around you. It knows where you are and where you want to go. It's computing glue globs of information in a short period of time. And then someone is on their end, like saying, I'll accept that ride, right? I'll accept that call. That's a lot of information being processed in a short period of time. So that is another example. And, I think that those are, prime examples of how just cell phone data alone is just all these transactions that are being computed and the ways that we're using them to basically make our lives easier and to protect the public's health. Now, in the spirit of John Lewis, I think that we should be thinking about using big data to find good trouble. And so what do I mean by good trouble? I think that data scientists can actually do work that will do good and to do public good. And so I will share two examples of what I mean by that. One is in the education space. And in the education space, I think that we could mine data and we can create solutions so that we can understand how students perform. And particularly, I'm interested in low-income students, making certain that low-income students have every opportunity to succeed in education. So we can mine the data that's available, or we can create new opportunities to actually collect data. And Facebook is doing something really similar where they're putting sensors in class and they're trying to understand the way the students interact with the classroom environment. They're also taking kind of images of facial expressions and things of that nature so that they could start understanding what components of the curriculum and the delivery styles are perhaps much more easier to consume by students. Now, there will be privacy issues. I get that. There will be ethical issues. But I think the fact that we have the ability to do that and collect data to do good is worth exploring. The second one is in the criminal justice space. And so you've been hearing about the Black Lives Matter movement and the defund the police, right? And this is one that I think where we're likely to see a lot of effort. And this is the area where, when you pick up a phone and you call 911, you get a whole lot of calls coming in. You get millions and millions of calls coming in. I believe that police departments and data scientists who are working with police departments are going to start combing these data to understand whether certain calls for services can actually result in a non-police officer response. That is, a social worker or a community health worker being sent out to a call instead of a police officer, right? And so that shows that there are ways that we can mine criminal justice data even to actually do good, right? And to create good trouble. So as I close, the one thing that I want to share with you is that my story is your story. When I was an undergrad, math science was my thing. They were my thing. And I was thinking about, well, what do I do? Around my senior year, as I was starting to graduate, I got this intern opportunity, started working with folk who exposed me to the world of data, and I haven't looked back since, and I have not regretted it. So I thank you all, and I encourage you to do good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. Okay. So now we are going to turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Augustine Natembe, who is the Associate Professor of Economics and the co-PI for the DSA initiative.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to have you here this morning. I'm also excited about our SORI scholar presentations. And these the researchers have labored for 2 months conducting research on various topics using data science and analytics tools and methods. Without further ado, I would like us to get started. The first SORI scholar to present this morning is Jasmine Perkins. The project title is Uncovering Ethnic Disparities in RSV Infections. The mentor for this project is Dr. Taisha Burks. Perkins, you have 20 minutes, and the audience is giving 5 minutes for Q&A. Thank you. Samantha, can you bring her up?
Yeah, she should be coming in right now. Oh, she just joined. There we go.
There you go. Thank you.
Jasmine, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Okay, hi everyone, good morning. My name is Jasmine Perkins, and today I'm going to be presenting my project of uncovering ethnic disparities in RSV infections. and I had the pleasure of working under the mentorship of Dr. Taisha Burks this summer. So RSV is an abbreviation for a virus called respiratory syncytial virus. It's a common human orthopneumovirus that causes cold-like symptoms. And for those who are unfamiliar with a orthopneumovirus, it's a virus that causes respiratory tract infections. The cold-like symptoms can be things such as difficulty breathing, coughing, fever, runny nose, etc. More serious cases of RSV can cause bronchiolitis, which is the inflammation of the small airways in the lungs, and or pneumonia, which is inflammation in the air sacs of the lungs, which causes the lungs to be filled with fluid. So RSV has been known to be more prevalent in children younger than 5 years old and adults 65 years and older. Each year in the US, 2.1 children under the age of 5 have outpatient visits due to RSV. 14,000 adults 65 years and older die from RSV infections. And children 5 years and under have over 57,000 hospitalizations due to this virus. And for adults 65 years and older, it's over 175,000 hospitalizations for RSV infections. So RSV has been known to be higher amongst the Alaskan Natives population, and more serious cases of RSV are higher amongst infants born from Black mothers. So, with advanced medicine and technology, scientists have been trying to devise ways to prevent the spread of these viral infections. But despite all of this, there are some bottom line social determinants which make groups of people more susceptible to viral infections. And these in turn would be deemed as ethnic disparities. So some of the disparities can be things such as underlying health conditions, socioeconomic status, having unequal access to healthcare, frontline workers or jobs without telework can be a factor. Your geographic location, your gender, and even genetics, which is what we'll be focusing on in this project. So going into the genetic variability, we want to focus on SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphisms. Those are single base pair changes in your DNA sequence. They are mutations, so they can lead to things such as diseases and make you more susceptible to certain illnesses and viral infections, which is in our case. So as you can see, these three people have their own unique letter DNA sequence. And just from one single base pair change can be a determining factor of whether you have a disease or whether you'll develop a disease or develop some type of virus or illness, etc. Which leads us to introduce our research goal. So over the course of this program in the summer, I've been trying to use a freely accessible database to identify genetic changes within our ethnic groups of interest that may affect the rate of RSV infections and thus lead to health disparities. So going into our research methodology, the first thing we did was use scientific literature to learn about RSV, learn about the virus itself, how it's developed, any genes that are linked to the development of this virus, statistics in the population that, RSV has mainly affected, etc. And after going through a lot of literature, we were able to identify one gene, the CX3CR1 gene. And this gene encodes for the receptor, chemokine receptor 1, which is used by RSV to infect cells. After identifying the gene, we used a genomic database named Ensemble to identify genetic variants between our populations of interest. due to the fact that our database did not have any information on Alaskan Natives, we had to dig into our literature a little bit more to kind of see what population we could use within means of our database. And we found that Alaskan Natives were hypothesized to be of East Asian descent. So we made East Asians one of our focus groups in our entire project. We also used the African population and we used the European population as a control group. Now, going into the curating of our data, we use specific filters to kind of filter out, other variant IDs that we didn't need within our data set. One of the filters we used were making sure that the classifications of our variant IDs were SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, and having a SIFT of 1. Now, SIFT is an abbreviation for us predicting if these missense variants have a significant impact on our protein function based on sequence homology, or sequence similarity, etc. And we were looking for a SIFT of 1. Now, after using the specific filters to curate our data, we were able to export all of the data into Excel, Microsoft Excel, where we would further curate it and then go back in and look at the population genetics within the genomic database. So here's the home page of the genomic database that I've used. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple, very easy to use, and freely accessible. Up on the upper right-hand corner where there's this red arrow is the box where I inserted my gene and also the variant IDs to search them up within this database. And after searching the gene, I focused on the variant table, which this page came up, and I circled the 2 filters in which I use, which is the classification and the SIFT of 1. And then after filtering and curating my data a little bit or cleaning it up, I exported it into Excel, which is this upper right-hand icon right here at the top of the table. And then after I exported the data, like I said before, we further curated it. So there was a lot of duplicate IDs. As you can see, the number began at 17,800. And after removing duplicate or copies of the variant IDs, we were able to drop our number down to about 3,700 variant IDs, which made our data a little bit more easier to work with. So after further curating it and removing the duplicate IDs, we took each variant ID one by one and inserted it back into our genomic database ensemble to look at the population genetics. Essentially, this is the page that we would look at with our population genetics. I circled all 3 of our projected populations. And when looking at this page, we're focusing on the allele frequency, which is the 2 columns of the 2 letters on the right-hand side of the colored bar, the red and blue bar. And what the allele frequency represents is it's the prevalence of an allele in a population. So how many people have this specific allele within their DNA sequence. So after looking at the population genetics, we were able to formulate a data chart. The black is going to represent our variant IDs in which we noted within the population genetics. The yellow represents our East Asian population. The green represents our African population, and the red represents our European population. Now with the allele frequency, it was going based on a count. So we converted the count into a percentage to get more accurate numbers and more accurate comparison. Next to each percentage in each population, we identified the allele that was found within that number of people in their DNA sequence to give it a better understanding for everyone. So this is our data visualization, one of our charts. On the y-axis is the allele frequency based on the percent, and the x-axis is the variant ID with the gene CX3CR1. Now, each bar represents the percentage of people with the specific allele in their DNA sequence. So above each bar, you see that they have a letter, and that's the letter that was found within that number of people's DNA sequence. Now, this is a chart showing the variant ID with the highest variation amongst all of our populations. So this one has fluctuation within all of our populations, but it shows higher fluctuation within the European population. This is another chart. It still has the same format with the X and Y axis being the same and the bars being labeled with the identified allele. This is a chart showing the variant ID with the second highest variation amongst the population. And good for us, this was actually something we wanted to see, which is variation within our East Asian population, which is something that we definitely wanted to note and show to you guys. And this is the last chart. Again, same formatting with the X and Y axis and the bars. This is actually one of the variants that showed no variation. And this is something that we did not want to see. The whole purpose was to see some type of fluctuation within the alleles and the populations. But this is one of the ones that we did not see any fluctuation in. And we definitely wanted to show you guys just to kind of give you some comparison or some type of control. That way you can see how significantly important the other two variants were. So after analyzing the data, we came up with 8 variant IDs within our population of interest. 7 of them were deviating from 1.9% or less. There was one variant ID, which was RS number 3732379. This showed a deviation of 28.5%, which is the highest deviation that we had out of all of our variants. But it showed this deviation within the European population, which we weren't trying to see. We were more so trying to see a deviation in the East Asian population, but it was in our European population instead. So we did have some limitations within this project. One big limitation was that our genomic database did not have information on Alaskan Natives. So we had to alter our populations of interest just a little bit based on the literature I told you. And also, we weren't able to find some helpful diagrams and pictures such as crystallography. And the crystallography was supposed to show us the binding of the virus RSV to the gene CX3CR1. And it was going to allow us to predict if our SNPs would make a difference in the binding. So in the future, we plan to explore more variant IDs in hope to find higher genetic variants, preferably in our population of East Asians. We definitely want to also search for more diverse genomic databases, working with more databases with diverse, population genetics could help us a lot as far as data-wise. And then we also want to determine if our SNPs affect the binding of the virus RSV to the gene CX3CR1 and see if it affects the infection rates. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my presentation today. I definitely want to note some people in the program specifically, such as my mentor. She's been a huge help throughout this project. She's pushed me, encouraged me, and she's been the biggest help throughout this entire presentation and throughout this entire program. I also like to thank my collaborator, Dr. Kari DeBink. I want to thank the entire BSU DSA Surrey program, Dr. Brown Robinson, Dr. Zenabi, Dr. Ntembe, and Samantha as well. And I also want to thank the National Science Foundation for funding me on being able to do this project this summer as well. And here, of course, is my literature for all of the work that I've done over the course of this program. And yes, do I have any questions?
Okay. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for this very exciting presentation. I can see that there are some questions on the chat. Can you see that? Or if you want me to read them, I can do that.
I think is Dr. Brown Robinson one of them?
Yes.
Do you believe? Oh, it says, do you believe diet can impact RSV outcomes? So personally, with us looking at the ethnic disparities, diet was not one of the things that we saw was a possible effect of susceptibility of the virus. But even with looking at any virus, your immune system is efficient, like the bottom line of how you deviate of fighting off the virus or not. So having a good balanced diet, I'm sure it can build up your immune system and of course change the outcomes of you having or of you keeping or getting worse serious cases of the virus. But I don't think that it could be a bottom line of determining the impact of the virus or not. I would have to say that would come into play with like your immune system and things of that nature.
Yes. Great. You have a lot of congratulation messages. Everyone is saying that the presentation was great and the job was good. We want to thank you so much, and we will be kicking you out. There's a question, please. Using the data, have you compared African and Asian group? Is there any variation? Can you answer that, please?
Okay, so with our data, we haven't compared the African and Asian group. It was more so of us focusing on the East Asian group. The African group was based on the literature of the severe cases of RSV, and the European was supposed to be, the European group was supposed to be a control group. So we didn't compare the East Asian and African group, but we can do that in the near future to see if there's any variation within the two groups.
Great. Another question from Danielle Umpat. To what extent do you think social determinants of health play a role in RSV disparities?
So just so I'm going to go back to the slide because it has some of the social determinants here. But off the top of my head, basically, I think that with the social determinants, like with socioeconomic status, of course, people of low class aren't able to have a lot of access to healthcare. And then also going into the geographic location, it can be very important of where you live. There was a documentary that I saw once where it was a small town in North Carolina, and these people were living by a farm, and most of the people in that area had either asthma, cancer, etc. So for the social determinants, the bottom line is to understand why these certain ethnic groups or why these certain groups of people are developing these viral infections or these diseases or these illnesses. And these are basically just to give like an explanation, despite all the medicine and technology that these scientists have been trying to devise to prevent these diseases, etc., there's still the bottom line of social determinants being the cause of these or the cause of more susceptibility within these ethnic groups.
Perfect. As messages of congratulations keep on coming, Marianne Booker wants to know if this research is going to be published.
So we plan on working on a publication next month, more so on a systemic review of the research, due to the fact that we weren't able to look at the Alaskan Native population itself. The research will probably be published in the future after we kind of buffer out some things and kind of work more on it a little bit. But I will like to say that, yes, this research might possibly be published after we do a little bit more buffering.
I think this is from Dr. Lynch. She says, this is very interesting research. Great job. Keep up the great work. But do you plan on continuing this research in the near future?
Yes, actually, I plan to pursue a career in research after I obtain my bachelor's in biology. I want to do a post-bac for a year to build up my research portfolio just a little bit, and I plan to attend graduate school in the fall of 2022 in hopes to obtain a PhD in genetics so I can do genetic research.
Fantastic. Everyone is proud of you, especially your mentor, Dr. Taisha Burks.
Thank you, Dr. Burks.
Samantha, please, can you bring in the next presenter?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay.
We're ready for you, Dr. Ntembe, to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you. Yes, the next scholar is Ariel Glover, and the title for today is Economic Growth in Maryland. And the mentor is Dr. Akena Fox. Ariel, you have 20 minutes. And again, the floor is given 5 minutes for Q&A. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Again, my name is Ariel Glover, and I worked under the mentorship of Dr. Fox, and my topic was economic growth in Maryland. I chose this topic because I've been living in Maryland for the past 4 years, and I wanted to know economically how the state was doing in comparison to other states, and especially if I want to start my career here in the near future after graduation. So this study investigates the factors that contribute to economic growth in Maryland, focusing on output, labor capital, and human capital. And I wanted to discover what the drivers of economic growth, and in particular, what economic factor drives the state of Maryland's economy. So when doing some literature review, I discovered that many economists, one being Eli Shin from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, stated that 3 main factors that drive economic growth are accumulation of capital stock, increases in labor units, and technological advancements. And with that being said, the growth in Maryland's economy can be broken down by accounting for what percentage these factors actually play. And also, studies have been done in the past, one in specific by Jim Woodruff, saying it's important to know how human resources have an effect in the economy. And I learned that skills and education and training of the labor force have a direct effect on the growth of the economy. So if there's any unskilled workforce or shortage in labor, then the economy will begin to decline and lead to higher unemployment. And to the right, you can see some of the data sources I used and reviewed when completing my research. So when beginning the research project, I knew that the data science methodology was important to follow, mainly because it's a data science-based project. And in the first stages, we had to make sure we obtained the big data badge, reiterating some of the things that Dr. Johnson stated earlier. We had to have a big data understanding. So I started with the economic understanding and a knowledge of Maryland's economy and where they stood compared to other states in the US. And then I developed my analytic approach to discover where I wanted the project to go and what functions I plan to use to create my research questions. Then I collected data from my functions and got an understanding to what the data was actually saying. And then I prepped the data in Tableau and created visuals, ran tests, and evaluated my results. And I think it's important to know that this is a process and a continuous loop. So when you evaluate your results, you can also do further research and continue using the methodology. So the purpose of the study is to discover whether the economy will continue to experience growth based on the effects of labor, capital, and human capital, and whether those factors that are growing most rapidly are now large enough to a point where the future performance could have a significant macroeconomic impact. So the analytic approach is taking first by knowing that capital, labor, and technology are main elements in economic growth, like I stated previously in the introduction, and improving on them plays an important role in the increase of wealth in the state. So first I started by identifying my variables and also inputting these variables into Tableau to create visuals, and then performing predictive analysis. So now beginning to the visualizations in Tableau. So I want to discuss the methods I took to create and complete the analysis and visuals. First, I downloaded the data into Excel. And then from there, I cleaned the data by removing variables that were not needed, such as the different states other than Maryland, years that I did not want to use, even variables that were included in the data set but not needed for my project. And once the data was cleaned and all four data sets were merged, I created a column for years, output, capital, labor, and human capital. And from there, I input the Excel into Tableau and then created visuals and a dashboard to showcase those visuals. So my first data set came from the labor of the Economic Analysis, Bureau of Economic Analysis. And I found this, and this is the output, and this is the gross domestic product, and this came from the Economic Bureau of Analysis. And as you can see on the very first row, it shows the all industry total, and that's just summing up all of the GDP for that current year, and it shows the factors that make up the GDP, and it's analyzed over a period of time. Following that, I found the labor data, which is the total employment data, which was also found in the Bureau of Economic Analysis. The diagram shows in the second row indicates the total employment of number of jobs in Maryland over a period of time. In my third data set, I found the capital, and this was found on the Center for Financial Development and Stability at Kenan University. And as you can see, this data was quite large. The diagram shows that on the side, the rows were already in the 2000s, and this was only in 1998, and it ranged back as far as 1925, and showed data for all states in the US, but I focused on Maryland and the capital data, which is shown in the right. And then the final data that I found was human capital development. And I use enrollment as a proxy, which involves training beyond high school. And I found this on the University System of Maryland Institutional Research Information System. This data collected the total enrollment for the different fields of academics and the many universities, as you can see, Bowie's on one of them. And it collected the total of each field for a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. So after the data was downloaded and cleaned and merged, I input them into Tableau. And this slide just shows a Microsoft Excel sheet that I input into Tableau, showcasing the 5 columns and the variables that I used. So this visual here that I made in Tableau depicts the 4 variables. As you can see, output, capital, labor, and human capital all increase and experience growth and are positive, but we can see that human capital's growth is smaller in size compared to the other variables. Now getting into my predictive analysis. I used a neoclassical growth model derived from the Cobb-Douglas function to capture economic growth. And in this model, A captures the overall efficiency of capital, labor, and human capital. And K is the capital accumulation, L is the labor force, and H is human capital development, and Y is the output. So next is the estimable linear regression equation. This is used in order to estimate parameters of the neoclassical growth model, and of which like a log linear transformation would be used to run the regression. And it's expected that the coefficients of the variables are all going to be positive and greater than 0. So the data was derived from a wide variety of sources, and distributions were very uncertain. And so in the study, we used a robust regression model to estimate the parameters of the log linear transformation using eViews 11 University Edition. Initially, I tried to run a simple linear regression, realizing that some of the coefficients were negative, which were not expected. So here's the results equation. As you can see, the numbers before each independent variable are the coefficients, and the numbers in the parentheses below are the standard error of estimates, which is a measure of their statistical accuracy. Getting into the regression results, looking at the coefficients of all 3 variables, you can see that they are positive. But you can also see that human capital is less significant with a coefficient of 0.0090, which meaning that it is positive, but it isn't as robust compared to capital and labor. Also, I'd say that you can see that with a 1% unit change in capital, it would lead to a change in GDP by 41%, labor by 79%, and then capital by 0.09%. So getting started with our diagnostic tests, the first test is the correlogram. And the slide shows that autocorrelation and partial autocorrelation are visual ways to show over time expectation, and can give like a good idea whether or not the pairs of data show that autocorrelation, although it cannot be used for measuring how large the autocorrelation actually is. So by looking at this autocorrelation, you can see that the coefficients are significantly statistically fit, and the fit's very tight. So there's no evidence of any error going on. And the correlogram also has spikes and certain lags, but the Q statistics are not significant at the spikes. So there's no indication that the errors would be there. Next, we did a histogram normality test, and looking at the Jarek-Barrett test, it's very significant. So that shows the goodness of the distribution. So the underlying null hypothesis is that the residuals are normally distributed, and the alternate hypothesis is that the residuals are not normally distributed. So as can see from the output, that Jarek-Barrett has a probability of 0.671, which is greater than the level of significance, which is 5%. And so the null hypothesis is therefore not rejected. So the conclusion is that the residuals are normally distributed. So from the research, I implied that all 3 of the variables positively affected the efficiency of output, increasing economic growth over Maryland. We can see that human capital had the least effect, but I correlate that to the result of the specific data I use. I use school enrollment, not taking into consideration that not everyone who enrolls actually graduates and receives a degree. Also, we know that times have changed due to COVID-19, so unemployment is high. Different education institutions are shutting down, like coming into school, and also many student centers are not having as much people work there. So labor's contribution is going to start diminishing over time, which could potentially cause a decrease in economic growth and development in the state of Maryland. Some limitations that I faced were discovering data for human capital over the past 20 years. I also believe that time constraints played a big part with finding certain data and doing more in-depth research. But given that this is my first time doing research, I know that the next time will be more proficient. For future research, I would like to look more specific into specific service sectors such as IT and technology. I think that technology is going to become a leading force, a factor in economy's growth today, and dictate many decisions in the near future. So there'll be less work from us as humans going into businesses and working, and more jobs will be depending on robotics and computer-driven work. So I think it'd be important to see how the government can create policies and complement the work of human. So both technology and human can like complement each other to both drive the economy forward. And here are the references that I use. I want to say overall that this experience has been difficult at times, but also rewarding. And with that, I want to thank my mentor, Dr. Fox, for staying on me and making sure I continue this process and helping me at different times of night, whether it was 2:30 in the morning, sending emails with new ideas or data that I could use. I also like to thank Bowie State University's data science undergraduate program, Dr. Brown, Dr. Zenabi, Dr. Ntembe, and also Samantha for keeping us on time with our paperwork and everything, and then also the National Science Foundation. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Aria. So there is a question from Dr. Brown, I guess. What are your plans after this graduation? What do you plan to do?
I plan to work with public policy. That's one thing that I want to do. I'm very interested in working with public policy. So I'm not sure exactly what I want to do. I want to go straight into get my master's, but I do want to work around that area.
Okay. Let's see if there are other questions. Great presentation, Janetta. And you have, let me see. Okay, thank you so much. That was great. In the absence of any other questions, can I see questions? What type of data limitations did you run into, Dr. Brown?
I think the main one was finding human capital development. I wanted to use school enrollment. I wanted to use education attainment, but there had not been any long-term data, maybe only for the past 8 years. There's been data on that. So that was one of the main things that I struggled with.
The question from Janetta, did you reach out to Prince George's Economic Development Corporations for any research assistance?
No, I reached out to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and they did give me a lot of data on Prince George's County because that was my first project topic. But then with the amount of data they had over only the short amount of years, I then moved up to Maryland.
And so that means that perhaps if you want to move this research further, you may have to contact the Economic Development Corporation for PG County.
And that is good to know. Thank you.
Okay. In the absence of any other question, we might be calling in the next group of researchers. Okay. Great presentation. It would be great to see a regional analysis. There's another comment that it would be great to see a regional analysis, just like PG County or Howard County and stuff like that. Probably the next thing you do, next time you will have more information. You already know who to reach out to. That's going to be helpful. Thank you. Samantha, can you pull? Okay, good. So the third presentation today is by Sydney Gilliam and Christopher Moss. The title is The Impact of COVID-19 on Destruction and Creation of Business Firms in the United States. They work under the mentorship of Drs. Kavita Kapoor, Dr. Fali Asadi, and Dr. Ntembe. Over to you, Chris and Sydney.
Good morning, everyone. The title of our study is The Impact of COVID-19 on Destruction and Creation of Business Firms. My name is Christopher Morris.
And I'm Sydney M. Gilliam.
You can control the slides.
Heard.
Yeah, so my name is Christopher Morris. I'm a business management major, and I'm a graduating senior coming up after this fall semester. So I'm excited to get ready to get out of Bowie and get everything I need to do done.
I'm also a business management major. However, I'm not graduating in December. I'm graduating in May. Since the discovery of COVID-19 in the late 2019, the U.S. economy has experienced an unprecedented shock. Measures to control the pandemic, such as social distancing and economic lockdown, have been quite effective in slowing down the spread of the virus in some countries, as well as the United States, certain states. And these infection control measures have exerted tremendous pressure on large parts of national economies. Using the tools of big data analysis and visualizations, this research presents the impact of COVID-19 on the creation and destruction of business in the United States. So our problem statements are: amidst the weak economic landscape that currently impacts the United States, the emergence and disappearance of business has been at the forefront, and these factors have tested business firms as they navigate through these challenging economic times. Business firms' long-term survival is dependent on their ability to adapt as well as to innovate. The purpose of our study is to analyze the destruction and creation of business in the United States in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And on the basis of this research, we will provide an in-depth understanding and knowledge of the effects of coronavirus on economic and business environment, and present the need for business firms to become innovative to adapt to new situations and challenges. So a little bit of background about our project. Joseph Schumpeter's theory of creative destruction presents that changes in the environment and technology will always influence destruction and creation. This application of creative destruction can be used to describe what has happened to the United States or make inferences at the hand of coronavirus. While industries who lacked innovative response were destroyed, the destruction allowed for opportunities for other businesses to thrive. And while we're not focusing on industries, we're just focusing on entrepreneurial firms, you will see the growth and destruction of both. Our research questions include: 1, what is the impact of COVID-19 on business firms in the United States? And 2, are there entrepreneurial opportunities that present themselves due to COVID-19? Our hypothesis is: 1, that new business opportunities will emerge due to COVID-19, and 2, COVID-19 is expected to lead to the destruction of business firms in the United States.
So getting into the methodology, essentially this study used visuals to interpret data collected on the spread of COVID-19 throughout the United States, examining its impacts on the destruction of businesses using unemployment data, and the creation of businesses using business formation data. To do so, we broke it up into 3 phases. After summarizing the business literature, there's data collection, data cleaning, and data visualization. So first we got into data collection. We found credible sources to provide the data needed for the study. We used Bowie State Library e-resources, Google Scholar, and governmental databases to obtain the data we needed. After collecting the data, we got into cleaning and preparing the data for visuals. To do so, we use Excel and Tableau to filter, remove, rename any consistent or irrelevant entries within the data. And finally, after preparing the data, we use Tableau to interpret and visualize the data, creating area charts, maps, highlight tables, line graphs, and more. This slide just presents a brief description of, on the data sources we use to conduct our research. The World Health Organization provided us with the data on COVID-19. They provide us with the number of cases, number of deaths accumulated throughout the US. The next is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They provided the data on the total unemployment and high propensity business applications. And lastly, we had the US Census, who provided the data on the number of firms, establishments, employment, and annual payroll. Now we're going to get into our data analytics and visualization. This visualization just shows the spread of COVID throughout the United States by month. So since COVID-19 infiltrated the US in late January, over 3.5 million cases and 135,000 deaths have been recorded by the World Health Organization. They're increasing by the day. It's important to notice the dramatic COVID-19 case increase from Q1, which ended in March, to Q2, which starts in April. There was an increase of about 720,000 cases. It's important to keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. So in response to COVID-19, unemployment was negatively impacted as well, reaching a high of 23 million unemployed in April. We also noticed a significant increase in the unemployment rate from March to April. It increased 10.3%, showing a positive correlation with COVID-19 cases as explained previously. Apologize about that. So due to lack of current data, to figure out the amount of businesses that have been lost due to COVID-19, we used the business formation data provided by the US Census in 2016. And we took total unemployment, which was about 126.7 million, and divided that by the total number of firms, which is about 5.9 million, to obtain the approximate average number of employees per firm, equaling 21 employees. This is just a Census Excel data sheet where we obtain the info showing the number of firms in employment. The arrows on there are messed up. I guess when we were doing it, a problem occurred. So the first line shows the number of firms, the total number of firms, and the total employment. And next, we discovered the change in unemployment from January to June, which was about 11.8 million. And we divided that number by the number of employees per firm, which is 21, to get an approximate number of businesses lost due to COVID-19. The results show about approximately 565,000 businesses were lost. This is just the 2020 employment data provided by the Bureau of Labor. It shows the unemployment rate and many other things as well. Although COVID-19 has devastated employment and has sunk in many businesses in the U.S., the total U.S. Business applications haven't been as heavily impacted, only decreasing slightly. From Q1 to Q2, only decreased about 8,000 applications, indicating that there are still optimistic business owners who believe there is still opportunity to be profitable while facing these current economic circumstances. Next I got into the creation of business firms in states. So we took a look at the top 3 states leading in COVID cases, which were New York, California, and Florida. And we looked at the bottom 3 states in terms of COVID-19 cases, which were Hawaii, Vermont, and Alaska. So for the bottom 3, for the most part, the cases, not the cases, the applications remain constant, never showing a change of more than 1,000, whether that be increasing or decreasing. As you can see in the visualizations, Hawaii, Alaska, and Vermont, they never grew. They remain constant for the most part. And as for the top 3 states, we noticed New York was led in cases at one point with over 400,000. And they also had an unemployment of 15.7 in June. There was a sharp decline in applications from Q1 to Q2, declined about 9,000. However, in Florida, there was a slightly fewer cases than New York, with about 315,000 cases, and they had an unemployment rate of 10.4 in June. But there was an increase in applications from Q1 to Q2, increasing about 2,400 applications. That's again indicating that there are still aspiring business owners who believe they can be profitable during COVID-19.
In conclusion, we hypothesized that COVID-19 would influence the emergence and disappearance of new businesses. Evidence from our data visualization show that new businesses did emerge during the pandemic, as well as businesses were destroyed. As COVID-19 cases increased, unemployment also did increase. This data and this research is ongoing, but being able to witness business formation during this time proves our hypothesis true. In-depth analysis based off of visualization shows that. So our research limitations include using an estimation for calculating firms lost, as well as national level study instead of industrial sectors, which is what we are originally interested in. But with the amount of time given for this project, we were unable to answer all the questions that we originally created. Due to lack of information, some of these aspects of this project were unable to be explored at this time for this due date. However, there is definitely opportunity for way more in-depth research. So for future research, our recommendations were sector and industry analysis, discovering innovative practices deployed, assessing statewide results, and also assessing the impact of government policy on business and entrepreneurial firms as well. We did have a couple of shout outs. I'd like to shout out all of our mentors, Dr. Kapoor, Dr. Asalti, and Dr. Natembe, as well as Bowie State University, and Dr. Brown, Dr. Zeneve, and Taisha Burks as well. Dr. Taisha Burks, my apologies. And as well as the National Science Foundation for allowing us to do this research, learn so much, and also help us with what we're gonna do after our graduation. So this kind of helped me personally because I wanna be a business owner. So now there's certain things that I'm looking out for that I've now been able to learn. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, guys.
Here are our entirety of references. And are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Sydney and Chris. And that was really great. And now we wait for questions and questions from the floor, from everyone else. So Dr. Brown, great job. What role do you believe state policies may have on business applications? What policies may you have on role do you believe state policies may have on business applications?
I'll answer that question. Statewise, I believe that startups aren't focused on, so many people may be kind of scared to jump into that arena and start up in a time like this. But shown from the visualizations and the data, there are entrepreneurs that are still ready to jump in and throw their hat in the ring and try to do something amidst this tough economic time. But state policies don't really they do have a negative effect because they don't support startups, but they don't have, that's the best way I could really answer that question.
from Jerome, great job of accumulating data and presentation. So in the absence of any other questions, your mentor, Kavita Kapoor, says that she is proud of you, Sydney and Chris.
It's a long time.
And in the absence of any other questions, we may have the next group of researchers.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Great. William is there. Hello, are we all there? Is William there? Okay, William, are you there?
Yeah,
Rama is there?
Ramar and
Okay.
Justin are making their way
Okay,
in.
I can see Justin. Rama is there. Okay, good morning. Thank you so much, Surrey Scholars. This project by Keg Williams, the second, Rama White, Johnston McNair. The title is Modeling Communities COVID-19 Cases by Demographic and Economic Indicators. The mentors for this project are Drs. Leque, Dr. Zinibi, and Dr. Brown Robertson. Scholars, you can begin. You have 20 minutes, and we have 5 minutes for Q&A. Thank you.
All right. So first, we'd like to thank Bowie State University's faculty and administration for the opportunity, National Science Foundation, and all of those who helped make this endeavor possible. And finally, those of you who are taking the time out of your day to watch everyone's presentation. My name is Justin McNair Sneed. I'm a rising senior, and I am a business administration major with the economics concentration.
My name is Ramar White. I'm a rising senior. I'm a business administration's major with the concentration in information systems.
How's everybody doing? I'm Kirk Williams II. I'm a rising senior, and business information systems is my topic, like what I'm studying.
Your major.
My major.
And we are modeling communities, COVID-19 cases by demographic and economic indicators. So here's pretty much an outline of what we're going to be covering throughout our presentation. So as we all know, COVID-19 has affected almost everyone across the globe, especially when it comes to their race, residency, and revenue. While the virus is affecting everyone, no one is being more affected than the Black community, especially in the United States. While others are keying in on data at county, state, and country level, we are mainly keying in on impact COVID-19 had on economically vulnerable communities in Maryland at the zip code level. In doing so, we gathered, assessed, designed, and developed a COVID-19 data repository for Maryland's economically vulnerable communities. The purpose of our research was to determine how far a reach COVID-19 had on economically vulnerable communities. You might ask, what determinants make a community economically vulnerable? Well, that was one of our questions at hand as well. Before we could identify what an economically vulnerable community was, we had to find out what demographic and economic indicators identified the community as well as community as economically vulnerable. Once we found out the indicators, we had to find what they had in common and thus create a model to predict the extent of COVID-19 on those communities using machine learning. Eberhardt and others of the Initiative for a Competitive Inner City, also known as ICIC, helped define economic economic vulnerability as an index that evaluates the social, economic, and demographic disparities among census tracts in the United States. Now, you may ask, what are those disparities? And to provide a few would be poverty rate distinguished into two categories, high and low. Communities with a high number of people of color, communities with a highly dense population, as well as communities with inconsistent access to healthcare. Robert Samuels of the Washington Post and Sharita Golden of Hopkins Medicine both discuss the disproportionate rates of COVID-19 illnesses and deaths in communities of color, in particularly African-American communities. Golden also provided risk factors similar to ICIC, such as population density and inconsistent access to healthcare. And as we gained an understanding of what factors make a community economically vulnerable, we propose such questions that help narrow our search. Do communities with more people of color have high population cases? Do communities without health insurance have high positive cases? Do areas with high poverty have more cases? And do communities with lower than the median household income have more cases? Do communities with high dense areas have more cases? And finally, what are some possible factors that affect positive cases in communities?
So the methodology that we use is the CRISP-DM, also known as the cross-industry standard process for data mining. First, we had to do an evaluation. Then we had to have a business understanding and data understanding of what we wanted to do. Then we did data preparation and data modeling, went back into evaluation, and went into deployment. The data sources that we used were Maryland's Department of Health for COVID-19 and also DC Muriel Bowser's Government of the District of Columbia for COVID-19 cases. We also used the American Community Survey of 2018 for economic vulnerability indicators from the United States Census Bureau, and we also used the census tract to zip code data from HUD.gov. The attributes for COVID-19 cases were the object ID, zip code, and total positive cases as of July 17th, 2020. So the COVID-19 raw data is as follows. We showed the zip code and we showed the total positive cases that led up to July 17th. We had 516 rows for Maryland, and we had it all the way down to the zip code level. Here are some of the attributes for our economic indicators. We had the tract GeoID number, the tract name, the economic vulnerability, poverty status, demographic, total population, household median income, and etc. Here's an example of our raw data for economic vulnerability. As you can see here, I zoomed in on some of them where you can see the state, the county, the tract GeoID number, the economic vulnerability level, the poverty status, whether it was low or high, the demographics of that area, the total population, and our other economic indicators that was in the previous slide. Here's our data model. For our COVID-19 data, we had used zip code as the primary key. In our economic data, we used the census tract ID as the primary key. In our tract/zip code data, we use the tract ID number. What this data model shows is how we planned on combining our three different data sets together using each primary key. Here's the raw data for the tract and zip code. Every zip code has a unique tract number. So to do that, we had to we used all of Maryland's zip code and compared it to the tract numbers of the entire United States. And this is what the raw data looked like inside of Access. Here's the combined COVID-19 data with the economic vulnerability indicators. As you can see, we have the zip code attached to its unique tract GeoID number. We have the city, the economic vulnerability level, the latitude and longitude of that area, the total positive cases of COVID-19, population, household income, and we also have the other economic indicators. We narrowed all of it down to 484 rows. Next were our data preparation steps. We had two steps. We took the data from the data sources sites that we had and turned them into Excel sheets. Then we used Tableau Prep to clean the data in each Excel worksheet, to join COVID-19 data with economic vulnerability data, and then aggregate that data from the census tract level to zip code level. Here's the Tableau Prep flow. As you can see, to explain this, we first took the Maryland COVID-19 data and the tract zip data and combined it together to create a data set. Next, we took that economic data and combined it into the previously joined data to create one large data set. After that, we aggregated it by choosing what we wanted to group and what we wanted to use as measures. An example of that would be using zip codes as a group and then using total positive cases as the measure of that. After we finished grouping and choosing what we wanted to measure, we created our final data set that we could use for analyzing. So the data analyzing and modeling that we used was visualizations using Tableau Desktop and classification machine learning techniques using Leka. In this first chart, we have a Maryland where we show the economic vulnerability level by the total positive cases of zip code. On the chart to the right, you can see that the total positive cases are measured by the level of color and its darkness. The areas with the lighter colors have less positive cases. The areas with darker colors have more positive cases. Next, we have these little circles that show the economic vulnerability level by its size. The areas with the bigger sizes of the circles are in the areas that tend to be towards the darker colors of total positive cases. Next, we have a map of Maryland again, where we show the median household income of Maryland, represented by the level of color and its darkness, to total positive cases, where it shows circles and the size of it. The areas with the larger circles tend to be in the areas that are in the lighter colors in Maryland, that have lower levels of median incomes. Next, we have a dashboard showing the population by total positive cases. What we found was areas with dense populations, they had average cases over 700 total positive cases. Next, we have a dashboard showing the percentage of people of color to positive cases. As you can see in this dashboard, the areas with low percentages of people of color didn't really pass over the 600 mark of total positive cases. But as the percentages of people of color rose, you see the level of positive cases rises. Around the 86% mark to 90, you can see it peak at just below 2,500 cases. Next, we have the poverty rate compared to positive cases. Where you can see here, poverty rate played a role inside of positive cases, but only up to the 14% mark. After that, we saw a drop off in total positive cases. So the cases, the cases rose up all the way up to the 14% marker, just below 2,500 cases. Next, we have percentage without health insurance compared to total positive cases. We see our first spike of cases rising around the 11 to 12% range, and then we see the highest peak around the 23% range, where we show just above 2,400 cases. As the percentage of people without health insurance rose, so did that of total positive cases. Next, we have the household median income compared to total positive cases. In Maryland, the median income is $86K. What we found out is that areas below that median income experienced higher total positive cases. As you can see in the graph, we actually showed a median line of those below the 86K marker and showed where they were higher in total positive cases in the chart above. Lastly, we have the cost burden households compared to total positive cases. In Maryland, anything over 30% is considered to be a high cost burden household. As you can see here, areas that were around the 30% marker had the highest spike in COVID-19 cases, unlike the areas that are above 30% and below.
Our next slide is modeling using machine learning. So we wanted to model our overall data based off of classes. So we use the amount of cases in order to classify this data. So our cases range from very high to very low for our data and machine learning. So we had to prep our data for machine learning. So our classes were C1, also known as very low, and those range from 0 to 20 cases. And then C2, where we rank low, and that data range from 21 to 150. C3, also known as average, ranked from 151 to 300. C4, our high class, which was 301 to 700 cases. C5 was very high, which was 701 to 10,000 plus COVID-19 cases. And we were able to create a column in our data, our Excel sheet, using an if function in order to convert those null value classes for each zip code. So, for instance, you see 297 cases of corona, that would be in our average care category, and 344 in our high category. As you see, very low, there's no number there. It actually is represented as 0 because some places have 0 COVID-19 cases. That would be in our very low section, and there were 484 rows of this data. Next, this visual, we placed our data in the WECA, and this visual shows our class frequencies in our very low, average, high, and very high sections. So, and this is about 484, like I said, rows of data. Some of our techniques and algorithms we use were a lot of decision tree methods, and those were C4.8, also known as J48 and WECA, and random forest algorithms. Those use the cross-validation method, which is basically taking a certain amount of cases, in our instance, about 480 cases, and dividing those by 10, and you'll get 10 sets of 48 cases. It helps it easier for the machine to learn. So this is our result using J48. So we have 5 classes. Generally, you divide 1 by 5 and get 20%. So that's not a high accuracy. So J48 is able to recognize each, value and place it in a class. Our highest correctly classified instances were 78%. And as you can see, we have a true positive rate in our C5 class of 53, our C4 class of 68, C3 51, C2 66, and C1 of 94. And 94 did so well because there were so many coronavirus cases in that section. So this is an example of one of our trees, or the rules that J48 created for our tree. And here's a visual of the tree that was created. So total population, the machine ranked total population, percent of people of color, and percent of people without insurance as the most important factors in this classifier. As you can see how the tree breaks down, on the left side, you have total population broken down in very low and percent people of color. Next, the very low classes and a percent employment in threatened industries and so on. So basically, in conclusion, our research questions are answered that communities with a higher percent of people of color have higher cases. Health insurance plays a role in a number of cases. Communities under the household median income are susceptible. Higher populated areas have more cases. We demonstrated the effectiveness of machine learning for developing the classifiers I just explained. So for our future limitations in our future research, we were only subject to, to Maryland data we used as equivalent to July 17th, focused on economic data, and our future work would be the entire East Coast and US communities, include more data on social housing and demographic data, more data at the lowest granular level, like blocks and tracts. Hypothesis testing using a larger data set. As you know, we only have 484 rows after we broke everything down. Use of other machine learning algorithms instead of J48 or random forest. So here are some of the references from our site. We reference a lot of things. So we'd like to acknowledge the National Science Foundation, Bowie State, and our mentors, Dr. Zanevi, Dr. LeCue, Dr. Brown, and others that helped us along the way to actually be able to present and work with some of the great mentors here today at Bowie State. Thank you. And any questions?
Thank you so much, scholars. And that was a great display of knowledge. We would like people to ask questions. Forward, she thinks that it's quite impressive. Dr. Brown thinks that is a very great job, and I also believe it is. It was exciting. It was great. So, can you pose your questions to the scholars, please? Dr. Nemi, what are your next plans? What are your next plans, scholars? What do you intend to do next?
Maybe in the future, probably try to get this published. Maybe like another symposium somewhere if we were able to present our research there, because this is COVID-19 is important. Important to be knowledgeable on, especially in our community, in the DMV community. So any way we can make light of the situation, I'll do what it takes. Well, we will, whoever's interested.
Yep. Any other messages of congratulations? Great presentation from Monica McNair. Good job from Charles Adams. Awesome presentation from Kayla. In fact, you have all the accolades. Great job. Thank you so much. Question, what other demographics or economics indicators would you like to receive? What other demographics or economics indicators would you like to receive in your research?
So, I mean, for other demographic indicators, you want to answer it, Justin?
So we can pretty much distinguish more or dive a little bit more into age and race, because we pretty much a little bit more like with Asian population, because they were affected first. So you probably want to dive into those as well, along the East Coast, pretty much, and then pretty much how they were affected income-wise and residency-wise.
Yeah, great. Wendy says it's a great job, and asking whether you are thinking of publishing the research work.
Publishing, yes.
Are you going to publish to conferences?
Yeah, that's, I mean, if they want us, we'll take it. Publication.
Okay. So now the pandemic is peaking again. So do you think there's more work to be done in expanding the demographics? Given that the pandemic is going up.
Yeah, there's more work to be done because and expanded demographics of piece. Yeah, for sure, because like I said, this is important, it's changing the whole world. Jobs is this is why this is important. This what Dr. Brown and other researchers were able to do to bring us together to be able to talk about, COVID-19 and other factors in the world, because like I'm saying, you said it's peaking again. So if we got to keep pushing, pushing out the effect of COVID, the importance of, staying clean and the numbers showing people that this isn't a game. So I agree. There is more work to be done.
Dr. Zinebi and Dr. Brown, they're all proud of you, and I guess Dr. Leque as well. Richard Knight, Prof. Richard Knight says a great analysis, but ask the question, what are the implications of how COVID-19 resources are allocated on your study? What does the study say about the allocation of COVID-19 resources?
I really don't know what resources are being allocated as of right now.
Or maybe it's like to help stop the pandemic, the spread of the pandemic and stuff like that. Maybe resources to help vulnerable populations, to have them better equipped to,
We could probably do
Give
more
them
research on that to see how
healthcare.
economic vulnerability communities are affected by not receiving the resources that are being allocated, like such as masks, wipes, hand sanitizer, soap, things like that. We could do research to see if those areas are getting those resources that the government's releasing.
From Marianne Boca, this is a great research topic. More research is needed on this topic. I agree with her. What are your thoughts on how to expand on the data presented?
Like you said earlier, just kind of getting more data, because we only stuck with Maryland. So if we're able to expand a little bit further, like getting a little more granular, so we were at the zip code level, if we can get even lower than the zip code level, if that's possible, and maybe splitting it into sections, kind of like what Justin was saying earlier, more of, we could do men and women, we could do age ranges. So I guess that's how we can expand on some of the data. Just as long as we can, get that data and are able to work with it, we can keep on going. Basically, it's a matter of what we can get or what they'll give to us to work, data.
Okay, great, thanks. From Wendy, exploring demographics and health disparities or access to health can be a future discussion to expand on the data presented. It's a suggestion anyway. I also have another question from Dr. Dayo. Hello, Cake. Nice to see you. Doing great stuff as expected. That's true. I agree. How would you translate this research into a user-friendlier, societal acceptable format? How can we assist you to spread your findings to everyone so that everyone can benefit from your great work? Okay, in fact, what she's saying is that your work is too academic. How can you break it down for the ordinary person like me?
Okay.
Do you think that is possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Everybody, every person is different, so they see stuff differently. This could be as a hard research question to understand. So I guess basically to answer his question, I guess relate to it in the way he sees it. So I guess COVID-19, I'm pretty sure everybody's accustomed to COVID-19. So I guess ask them, how is it affecting you? Are you in financial help right now? Is COVID-19 affecting you? Like, what can us as researchers do to help you see what you need to do in order to, better your economic situation you are in right now? Because we're working with, economic vulnerable places. So if we can understand what you're going through as a person, then I feel like we can be able to, break it down to what, what you need to be able to do, because the data is there and we're just trying to show it to you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Thank you for this exciting presentation. We are going to move on to the next group of scholars. Bobby. Good morning.
I'm having a challenge getting Ramar out of the room. So Ramar, you might want to try to exit yourself out of the presenters room.
So do we have Noe and Joe?
Yeah, we have Bobby here, and we have Kurt. Oh, Kurt's still in the room too. Okay, I need to get rid of Kurt.
Okay.
Okay, I'm having problems getting rid of you, Ramar. Oh, Ramar's gone now. Okay, so good. We have
He
Ramar now.
left. Okay.
Okay, so so Bobby, your colleagues should be joining you shortly.
Okay. Okay. They're all here. Welcome, scholars. We are proud of you. We are proud of the good work that you have done for the last 2 months. Today we have Noel, and we have Bobby, we have Joe. And the title of their project is Stock Price Reactions to Mergers and Acquisitions Announcements. The mentors are Doctors Tibebe Asefa, Sunando Sengupta, and Satina Williams. You have 20 minutes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I want to say thank you for being here today and giving us this opportunity to grow with you as professionals. I'd like to start by introducing my team. My name is Bobby Stanley, and I'm a senior with a major in business administration and a concentration in finance.
Hello, my name is Noel Knott. I'm an incoming sophomore, and I'm a business administration major with a concentration in economics.
Good morning. My name is Joe Salia. I'm a rising senior with a business administration major and a concentration in accounting.
And this summer, we worked together with our mentors, Dr. Asefa Sengupta and Satina Williams, on the stock price reactions to mergers and acquisition announcements. Brief introduction: mergers and acquisitions are the acts of consolidating companies or assets with an eye towards stimulating growth, gaining competitive advantages, increasing market share, or influencing supply chains. So essentially, they're transactions that occur between an acquiring company and a targeted company in order to grow wealth and remove competition. And our goal is to investigate the presence of abnormal returns in the stock market on the announcement date of mergers and acquisitions for publicly traded companies from 2012 to 2019. Just a brief background as well. The literature suggests that the targeted company will experience positive abnormal returns in the stock market. And in contrast, the acquiring company may see no impact at all. And in the study, so myself and my colleagues researched 12 scholarly articles and developed our own empirical research. And from one of the articles we reviewed, they found that the impact of the merger announcement on the target airlines is positive, except for one. That's the Northwest, due to a weakening demand for air transport as the US economy faltered at the time of its merger with Delta. So in this article, it was really about mergers and acquisitions amongst airline companies. And the literature suggests exactly what we were expecting to happen with our study. So the targeted company experienced positive abnormal returns after the merger and acquisition. And we hypothesized that the targeted company will see a significant positive abnormal return, while the acquirer may see no significant return at all.
So for our data and methodology, this study employs a standard event study methodology, and we fit a standard market model to measure normal performance. So the description of our variables: R is the statistical measure which represents the portion of the variance for a dependent variable that's explained by an independent variable or a variable in a regression model. Alpha is the figure for the stock that represents a single number. The number indicates the percentage above or below the benchmark index, equally weighted Cripps index, that the stock or fund price achieved. Beta represents the stock price's volatility in comparison to the market as a whole. And the error term is the residual value that results from a statistical or mathematical model. It is created after the model does not fully represent the actual relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. So in our study, actual returns minus expected returns will equal abnormal returns. And the abnormal return is the error in the equation. We are testing whether the error is significantly different from zero. We use Wharton Research Database and the two applications Eventus and Crips for this study. We sampled 53 pairs of US firms that announced mergers in the last 8 years, and we finally used 33 pairs in the analysis. Examples of firms are Microsoft, LinkedIn, Amazon, Whole Foods, Coach, and Kate Spade.
Okay, so using Wharton's research database, also known as WORDS, we were able to use this data collected, and in return, we received regressions that outline the impact of the announcement of mergers and acquisitions. So table 1 is the regression return for what we labeled as company A, which is simply the bigger companies or the acquirers. As I discuss these regression results, the highlighted / bolded information is what I'll be focusing on. And so those three things would be the date, the cumulative abnormal return, and the p-value. So we divided the days into time intervals, and that would be from -30 to +30. And what we're doing is we're looking at the effects during these periods of time. So -30 is 1 month before the announcement of a merger and acquisition, and +30 is 1 month after the announcement of a merger and acquisition. The p-value measures the level of significance in the data. So basically the p-value must be less than 0.1 or 10% to be statistically significant in our data. So with that being said, even though there are data here in the p-value section that is greater than 0.1, that information is still significant. But while we're looking at these regressions, we want to look at values that are less than 0.1 or 10% for it to be statistically significant in our data. So as we see here in the company A for the acquirers, there are no p-values that are less than 0.1. So there is no information for company A, the acquired companies that are statistically significant for our information. So here, using Tableau Prep, what we were able to do, we were able to clean the data and use Tableau Desktop to create a visualization that basically outlines the days and the cumulative abnormal returns. All right, so table 1 basically shows the results of the acquired firms. The cumulative abnormal returns are not statistically significant for the acquired companies, which is not a surprise since the acquirers pay a premium that investors are not willing to pay. So company B shows the acquired firms, which are the smaller firms. And this is the regression table that was produced. Like I stated previously, we highlighted the 3 most important things that are ran from these regression tables, and that would be the days, the cumulative abnormal returns, and the p-values. So looking at the p-values here in this section, we see that the highlighted sections already are less than 0.1. So many of the information highlighted in this regression are statistically significant. The most important piece of information here in this regression for the smaller companies, acquired firms, would be -10. The reason why this is so important is because the cumulative abnormal return is 11.52%, which is the highest mean return for this entire group, which means that from -1 to 0, which is a day before to the day of the announcement of a merger and acquisition, the stocks are going crazy. People are purchasing this smaller company stock at a rapid rate. So that's the reason why it's so high. Another piece of important information here would be +3 to +30, which is 3 days to 30 days after the announcement of a merger and acquisition. And the reason why this is so important is because this is the only negative statistic, this is the only negative abnormal return that is produced inside this data. So basically what this is saying that from 3 days to 30 days after the announcement of mergers and acquisitions, there's a decline in the price of the stock value, which is about 3.72%. This basically means that from -10, the day before to the day of, to about 1 month after the announcement of the merger and acquisition, the stocks are calming down, the prices are lowering out, everything is getting balanced out, which is ultimately what we expected, because we knew that in our hypothesis, we stated that we expected the smaller companies to have the higher abnormal returns. So figure 2, same thing. What we did was we used Tableau Prep to clean the data, and we had this visualization created using Tableau Desktop. The blue bar graph that is highlighted shows the high return for -1 to 0, which is the day before to the day of the announcement of the merger and acquisition. So what it's doing is showing that 11.52% of the companies, which is the highest abnormal return, was our biggest growth in the stock price of these companies. Okay, so table 2, like I stated previously, shows the results of the acquired firms. These findings are expected since our literature also suggested that during the announcement, there's a significant increase of stock prices in the acquired firms. And that's because we have to adjust for the premium that the acquirer, the bigger company, is paying for the merger with the smaller firms. So table 3 is a combination of both the acquirer and the acquired firms. Like I stated previously, for something to be statistically significant in our regressions, it has to be less than 0.1 or 10%. So with that being said, there's only one p-value here, which is less than 0.1, which would be from +3 to +30, which is ultimately 1 month after the announcement of the merger and acquisition of this company. The p-value is 0.0036, and the abnormal return is -2.82%. Basically, what this is saying that approximately after 1 month to the announcement of the merger and acquisition of both these companies combined, the stock price and value of the company generally goes down about -2.82%. So everything is balancing out, and the stock prices are going back to normal approximately after 1 month to the announcement of the merger and acquisition. And here, the blue, like the graph is highlighting, we see here that the blue, which is the last one, from +3 to +30, the blue bar graph is showing that is our most important piece of information that is brought up from the regressions that we ran. And we can see the decline of the stock price / value. So table 3 shows the results of the acquiring and the acquiring firms together. Only the -2.82% is statistically significant. And table 3 is basically showing us that it's better to run the acquired and the acquiring firms separately to get the best impact of the mergers and acquisitions for these smaller and bigger firms.
And in conclusion, the results show that the significant abnormal returns for the smaller firms are the only ones that we got back that were significant. So the 8.5 cumulative abnormal return from the 30 days until 2 days before the announcement, and the 11.52% 1 day before the announcement until the day of the announcement. The bigger acquiring firm did not exhibit any significant abnormal returns, which is what we expected, as we previously stated in our hypothesis. And our future research will include a bigger sample set and also look at an industry subcategories to see if there is any significant cross-sectional trend. And COVID-19 data will be included in future studies as well. Okay, any questions?
That was brilliant, Bobby, Noel, and Joe. Let's wait for questions. How did the integration of your disciplines of study, that is your concentration areas, help with this research? That is from Dr. Brown.
So for me personally, to answer your question, Dr. Brown, just last semester in my finance course with Dr. Sengupta, I had a merger and acquisition project already. So I already had a brief understanding of the mergers and acquisitions that we were going to be reviewing. So that's one way that my area of expertise helped me with this project.
For me to answer, being an accounting concentration, this was no surprise because often I'm looking at large corporations and accounting their large numbers. So being able to see, being able to break down the regressions, it wasn't very difficult. And on top of that, during our lessons, we're also learning about mergers and acquisitions of companies. Like I learned that last semester with Professor Minyara. So this was no surprise. It actually helped. It was actually pretty cool that this was my topic.
For me, it helped me apply economics in a more practical way, which is because economics is very theoretical.
Perfect. So from Dr. Asade, in view of COVID-19, do you expect a wave of airlines mergers?
I would have to do further research on the airline mergers and how COVID-19 has affected them. However, I've seen that Amazon is currently attempting to acquire AMC. So companies as far as theaters and any companies that are kind of like facing like hard times right now, if airlines are one of those, they should expect a merger and acquisition to happen between them. So any companies that are kind of suffering right now and need a bailout would probably be looking towards a merger and acquisition.
Yeah, and on top of that, we also did some prior research on the COVID-19, and we saw that it did have a negative effect on the number and value of a lot of mergers and acquisitions so far. So it wouldn't be a surprise if we saw a lot of airline companies merging with each other.
Perfect. From Dr. Fox, very interesting presentation. Thanks. Seems the null is not accepted in some cases, like null hypothesis. And seems the corresponding values are outliers. Example, like the abnormal returns. Do you think so?
It's not. Yes, that's true. It is not accepted in some cases after the literature review. It's just that some of them, or majority of what we researched, align with our hypothesis. So not everyone accepts the same exact hypothesis that we follow. That's true.
Perfect. From Sharon, for me, good job. Love the presentation. Dr. Senando Sengupta, thank you, Bobby. Tibebe, great presentation. From Dr. Azene Zenebi, what knowledge and skill sets do you think you lack at the beginning of the project? So let me just conclude his question. You lack at the beginning of the project. What knowledge have you acquired at the end of the project?
For me personally, I've learned a lot more about how the mergers and acquisitions do affect the stock price. I've learned more about how to use Excel proficiently. And I got a lot of professional experience from working with our mentors, me and my colleagues alike. This was a very interesting summer, great growth opportunity. So I'd say overall, I learned a lot.
Go ahead, Noah.
So before this, I didn't have any knowledge of finance, and I got like a lot of knowledge about the terminology through the literature reviews and all of our research.
You continue to receive a lot of praise from Dr. Sengupta. We are proud of all of you. Dr. Kapoor, very interesting research, great analysis. Yeah. From Dr. Brown, great job. So it appears we're having no more questions, and we have come to the end of this interesting exercise, a display of knowledge by our scholars. We are all proud of you. I will call up Dr. Brown Robertson to make concluding remarks. Samantha, did I take your place?
Samantha's coming up right now. Samantha, are you here?
I was asking whether I step.
No, you didn't. You did not. Thank you so much, Dr. Timbe. This was excellent. Samantha, I'm going to hand it over to you and I'll conclude. Oh, we can't hear you, Samantha. Okay.
We can.
Can we hear you now? Okay. Okay. Well, I'll do the thank yous for Samantha. So so thank you all so very much. Thank you to our student researchers and our faculty mentors. Thank you so much to Bowie State University administration, to the faculty, as well as alumni, students, and staff. Thank you also to our advisory board members, our National Science Foundation evaluators, Dr. Jacqueline Leonard and Dr. Monica Mitchell. And lastly, we want to also acknowledge our sponsors, along with the National Science Foundation and Bowie State University. We want to thank our sponsors, BG Line Star, Kodos Through Travel, and Future First. Have a great day. Stay tuned for more future data science and analytics initiatives at Bowie State University. Bye-bye.
Hi, everybody.
Bye-bye.